transparently. You're obviously extremely transparent and accessible. And one of the observations some of the citizens have had during the past year that there seems to be a lack of transparency or full understanding of some of the decisions being made by the council. And we understand that you're one man, so we're not boxing you in to speak for the whole council, but how will you work going forward to make sure that you and the other positions of the council understand that the implications of decisions that they make going forward have multiple effects, not just an immediate cause and effect? And let me restate that question. Was that clear, or do I need to restate it?
Yeah, you got to restate it. That's fine.
We've noticed there's some transparency issues in our community as well as the open community, that some things that occur in public and occur behind closed doors are not all the same. So going forward, how, as a council person, how do you believe, or how do you plan to make sure that we have more transparency going forward?
Well, one of the big things that we have changed and that I have voted in favor of every single time it's come up as a vote is to increase our transparency as it relates to open records requests. When I was first elected to council, we had an enormous backlog of open records requests where they weren't being fulfilled. And we also had a practice at the city staff level and at our former city attorney level to where they were fighting these open record requests and really kind of heading it off before it even got to council. And so we've made significant changes and improvements over the last year to where we have a new city attorney, we have a new city manager, we have a lot of new city staff, and they understand that we are way more willing to be open and transparent with the public than we were in the past. We had, I think it was 14 to 17 lawsuits that we had filed with the Attorney General to prevent the release of information. And so what we did as a council is we voted to end those lawsuits, to basically say, we are not going to fight these, we're going to give it out to the public. We don't care what it is, right? And so that's one of the things that I voted in favor of, and I was glad that a majority of the council did, was we basically ended all those and we said, we want to release them. So the people that have asked for the information, we're going to give it to them. We're not going to fight it anymore. That's the same thing that we did with some of the former attorneys' bills. People asked for those bills, and there was kind of a fight going on with that. We said, you know what, let's just release them. We're going to release them. And so we voted unanimously last meeting to release every bill that we had from that attorney.
Those are actions of preventing open records. Those are usually actions that are started by the citizens.
Correct. Yep.
So our question is, what practices can be implemented on the council to have more transparency up front?
Well, the other thing that we have asked for, and we have tasked, so another thing that I kind of took the lead on a few months ago was I initiated the creation of a communications task force to have citizens help us figure out how to improve communications with the citizens, between the city and the citizens. And one of the things that we are looking at is changing our entire website, having everything run through the same company, and putting more things online for citizens to see so they don't have to do an open records request. Our new city manager, one of the big things that impressed me the most when we were interviewing him is he said in his last city, he had a practice of having what's called an open checkbook, where every single bill or every single check that the city pays is published online in real time. And so if citizens are wondering where the money is going, he said that in his past city, he set it up to where any citizen could go onto the website and look to see where the money is. And that's one of the things that we're tasking him to do for our city. That's one of the things I'm asking him to do, is set that up for us so that citizens don't have to do the open records request because we've already given the information out. That's my goal, is to have it out there already.
Perfect segue. You talked about the new city manager. What are your own personal thoughts or councilman thoughts on how we can start strong with our new city manager? Just to recap, you said one of the things that you've liked is that he has an open book so that we know where money is being spent, and you would like to see that implemented on our website. Are there any additional things?
Well, I think the biggest thing with the new city manager is we need to get back on track with some of our bigger developments that we have going on in the city that have kind of stalled. So we have the perfect game development and that entertainment and sports district that really isn't kind of going anywhere. We've got our what we call our mega site, which is a piece of property that we own that's kind of here between here and Taylor. It's on the far eastern boundary of the city of Hutto, and our Economic Development Corporation owns a couple of hundred acres out there that are prime places for industrial places to come in and build. And we've not been able to land anything over the last few years. And so I'm hoping he can get that kind of unstuck where we can get some of that land sold and get some good development going on the east side of town. We can get our perfect game development going. We can get the co-op back on track. So those of you who know what the co-op is, that's that big downtown central area where the city hall is. And over the last 3 years, we've got two tenants. One is the city of Hutto, the city hall, and the other is the Southside Market, which is not even open yet. So it's going extremely slow. And I'm hoping that he can help us get that moving, get it going a little bit quicker, a little bit faster, and kind of help jumpstart some of these bigger projects that have seemed to have stalled over the last year.
All right, we're about to move into the Q&A section submitted by the audience. And the first question I would like to start with, Vanessa, would you like to read those or can I?
You can go ahead. There are several queued up, so I'll try to organize them for you, okay?
Good. I did find the first one, and the first one was submitted by Ms. Williams, and she said, what have been the lessons learned regarding the challenges that have been presented to the city of Hutto this year?
I think one of the biggest lessons learned that we have had is the city council needs to take a more active role in what's going on in the city. We can't just leave it up to a city manager to just kind of do everything and not be involved as much as we need to be. That's one of the things that I learned when I was elected last May. The process was that the city manager basically ran it and the city council just kind of sat back and let it run. And by August, I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable with that process. I wanted to be more involved. I wanted to understand what was going on. I felt like we really needed to be more involved up front, right? Our previous city manager just said, you know what, I'm the expert, I'm the pro, I'll take care of all the details and I'll just come to you when I need votes. And most of us became increasingly saying, we want to be involved. We're the elected individuals. We want to be involved from the start. And we've got 7 minds here that can help you. And so with our new city manager, he really has expressed a willingness to involve the city council a lot more than we've had in the past. So I think that's one of the lessons learned is we really do need to be more involved up front, receiving counsel and giving counsel and having it be more of a participatory process. That's one of the biggest things. And the other thing is with our budget, that we really, really need to keep a close eye on what our budget is, not only what we're spending, but what we're borrowing and what the long-term effects of that borrowing are. And that's another thing that I was really impressed with City Manager Hutmacher, is he said that when he budgets for an outlook of immediate, midterm, and long-term. And so he does, 1 to 2, 5-year, and then 10-year. And he helps us say, okay, what changes do we make now that will affect us 10 years from now? And how does that affect you? And so helping prevent us from making short-term decisions that sound good up front, but will really hurt us in the long run.
Thank you. Our next question is submitted by Ms. Henry. When we look at Hutto compared to other cities, our growth in commercial development has lagged significantly. Why do you think this has been the case? And how do we really engage in the development that is happening in Central Texas?
So I think it's so we did have some policies and some ordinances in place a number of years ago that really had the effect of businesses not coming here because it cost too much for them to come to Hutto, quite frankly. If they could develop cheaper in Pflugerville and it would cost them less to develop in Pflugerville, then they were going to go there. I mean, a business is going to go where they can make money, right? I mean, they're in it to make money. I'm in favor of offering incentives when they are performance based. And I think that's really where we need to get to where if we're going to bring a business in and if we're going to offer an incentive, that's fine, but it needs to be based on some kind of performance to where if they perform per the agreement, then they get the incentive. If they don't get the incentive. And so then they are incentivized to work hard and to do those things. So one of the first incentives that I participated in as a member of the council was with EDC Moving Systems. And so they wanted to relocate here from Austin, and they came in, and the deal we worked out with them was we would rebate a portion of their sales tax and a portion of their property tax if they brought jobs to Hutto and if they hit certain minimum requirements as far as, you know, how much money they would be bringing in. And so that's how that deal was worked out with them. And I think we need to do a lot more of that. Other cities are willing to give incentives like that, and we need to be willing to kind of work at those kind of deals too. So I think that's one of the reasons. And we've seen a lot of growth just in the past year. You've seen all the fast food coming into Hutto. We've got a ton of that. And most of you may not be aware, but we've got a great big industrial complex called Titan, which is on kind of the western side of town. We had given them the goal to fill it up within, I think, 5 to 10 years. And 3 years later, it's full.
Is that on County Road 108?
It's Innovation Boulevard. I'm not sure what county road that is.
Okay, that's 108.
It's probably 108, yeah. So it's kind of in between East Williamson County Higher Education Center and Emory Farms. It's kind of in that area there. And so, yeah, it's filling up, and they're ready to do phase 2. And they're moving along just great. And so we just need to be smart about what we're doing, be smart about the incentives that we're giving away, and make sure that we're not, you know, giving away too much, because it doesn't help us if we bring a business in, but it doesn't benefit the citizens.
No, it does not. The next question submitted is, how is the police department organized under the city? And will the city council have a role in the accountability or the transparency for the police department?
Great question. So the how the city charter is written is that the chief of police reports to the city manager, and the city manager then reports to the city council directly. So the chief of police does not report directly to the council. He's an employee of the city manager. And so that's kind of the structure of how it's structured. But since we have oversight over the city manager, we give him direction and tell him the direction that we want the police department to go, right? And so we basically control that through the city manager. And then the second part of your question was about kind of how we maintain accountability with the police department. Was that kind of the second half of that question? And so, you know, we're taking a more active role in what the police department does. Who's being hired? We're kind of keeping tabs on that as a city council. It's still the chief of police. It's his role and duty to hire and fire, but we're being asked to be kept in the loop as far as that. So I think there's some of that, but we have definitely asked our chief of police to make sure that we are being as transparent as possible with everything that we're doing, that we're releasing records, any public information request that comes in, which I think more than half that come in have to do with the police department. And we're making sure that those are being released in a timely manner. The ones that we can, of course, we can't release, you know, private information, but whatever we can, we make sure they're being released. And we now have the backlog is completely cleared out. Everything has been released that has been asked for, and that we've now have a timeline, I think, of about a week to where when the request comes in, we want it turned around and sent back out.
That sounds like some great improvements. Moving on to the next question submitted by Mr. Owens. He said, what plans are in place for improving infrastructure? And maybe what are some of your own opinions on how we can improve infrastructure?
Okay. So with infrastructure, so the current plans that we have right now is improving roads. That's a big one. So in November of 2018, the citizens approved 3 different bonds for us to go out and to borrow money, basically, and to do improvements as it relates to roads. The other one was parks, and the other one was public safety. Those are the three big ones that we did. And roads was a big portion of that. In fact, I think it was the biggest portion of the 125 million. I can't remember the percentage, but it was the greatest percentage. And so we have currently in the works, finishing up planning stages, improvements to the intersections at 1660 North and Limmer Loop, 1660 North and Highway 79, and 1660 South and 79. So those are the three main intersections that we're going to be improving. All of those, we've done traffic studies, and they get ratings based kind of like school ratings, A through F, right? And all three of those intersections are currently a D, moving towards F. And with the improvements, we're going to get them to between an A and a B. And so those are on the high priority for us as a city to improve those intersections there. I don't know how many of you live in those areas, but if you're there during school time or during work rush hour, I'm sure you're waiting there for a long time, and it's unacceptable. And so those are the ones that we're focusing on first.
What 3 steps would you take to put our city on a firmer financial footing?
Well, I think the biggest one is we don't want to, because when the voters approved the bonds back in 2018, that is basically like giving us a line of credit, right? So we haven't borrowed the money. We just have an approval from the voters to say you can borrow up to that amount, 125 million. What we do not want to do is borrow it all at the same time. We want to be smart about when we're borrowing and how we're borrowing. We need to prioritize what we're going to be doing first, and then as a council decide and give the city staff an understanding of what's on their top priority list. In order to do that, we need to have a capital improvement plan review, which we have not done in over 2 years. That is way behind schedule. We should be doing that on an annual basis. And so my request to city staff is that we put that on an annual basis. We review the capital improvement plan, and then we prioritize and tell staff, here are the top issues that we want you to work on. Here are the roads we want you to fix first. Here are the parks that we want you to improve first, right? Those are the things that we need to be doing. And I think if we do that on an annual basis, and then we have every 6 months kind of a check-in to see where we're doing and how we're doing and to see if we need to make adjustments, that's what I'd like to see. So every year we have an annual retreat. As a council, we go and we give direction, and then in 6 months we just do a check-in to see how we're doing. Are we moving forward on what we've asked you to do? Are there any issues that we have come up? Are there any changes we need to make to adjust to the plan?
We have about 2 more questions, but I want to go back to the statement you just made. And just for the clarity of the audience, does the city manager, for those bonds that were approved, does the city manager in their purview have the ability to just borrow, or they need to come back and check in with the city council and say, hey, I want to spend this money that we had already budgeted to spend? Is that how that works?
Great question. It all has to come before the council. Before we can go out for new bonds, the council has to approve every one of those. And so when they want to do a new road project, they have to come to us to say, okay, here's the road project, here's what we want to do, and it's going to cost us this much money in order to do the planning portion. And then we approve that part. And then they come back and say, okay, we're done with the planning. Now we need to purchase right of way, and it's going to cost us this much money. And we approve that part. And then they come back and say, okay, now we're ready to actually spend the money to do the work, and then we approve that. So not only do they have to come to the council, but they have to come to us multiple times.
So, all right. So just to recap, you issue a bonds, you put it before the community. They vote yes. Several months or several years later, when it's time to kick off that project, as it moves along in phases, the money is released and approved. Is approved by council and then released? Is that how that works?
Exactly. That's exactly right. Yep.
All right. So the next question is, what is your thought process for annexing land that is increasing the number of homes and outpacing the diversity of business and homes? And this may fall somewhat in the purview of EDC, but they would like to know what's your thought process.
Sure. So for annexing land, a vast majority of our annexations are empty land. So it's land where nobody lives. In the last year, I cannot think of a single neighborhood that we've annexed since I've been on council that had somebody already living on it. So it's pretty much open land that's undeveloped that a developer wants to build homes on in the future. And so he wants to be part of the city in order to be able to do that and to be serviced by the city, right? I think the last large subdivision that was annexed that was pre-existing was probably Lakeside Estates. And I think that happened roughly 10 years ago.
I was on planning and zoning for that. That is correct. And part of, yes, Lakeside Estates, all the way up until Gaddis School Road.
Yep. And so, you know, it's not it's not typical for us to want to start annexing existing homes that aren't in the city, right? That's not typically what we, and part of the reason for that, to be honest, is there are some subdivisions that it would cost a lot more money to the city to maintain that existing subdivision than we would ever get out of it in property tax. And so we have to be smart about what we're annexing, right? And we need to annex it for the right reasons. I know, like, there's one community that would love to be annexed by the city, and that's Star Ranch. They're on the very far southwest corner of Hutto, and they have Hutto addresses, but they are not part of the city. And for us to annex them, we would have to basically buy out the MUD, the municipal utility district they're in. And we don't have the money to spend millions and millions of dollars to take on their debt. We just can't do that. And so, although we would love to have them as citizens and they would love to be citizens of the city of Hutto, again, we need to be smart about how we're doing it. And so my feeling with annexations is we need to do it smart. We need to annex where it makes sense, to where the annexation will bring in more tax dollars to maintain than it will cost to maintain. And if we can't do that, then I don't see the reason why we even annex land like that.
A lot of those families in Star Ranch with Hutto addresses, they go to Hutto ISD. And one of the questions posed, we have 2 more questions left, and the second to last is, what are some things that partnering up with the ISD, what are some things the city can do by partnering up with the ISD to improve relationships along that path?
You know, that's a great question, because like you said, there are a lot of people who attend Hutto ISD, they pay Hutto ISD taxes, they have Hutto addresses, but they're not citizens of Hutto, right? They can't vote in city elections. There are even people who have Round Rock addresses who attend Hutto ISD. And, you know, they're trying to participate. So one of the things that we have done and that I've been fully in favor of is, when I was on council and when I was first elected, in order to serve on any of the boards or commissions, you had to live within the city limits. And we have freed up several of our boards and commissions to allow individuals who live in the ETJ to now participate in some of that process. The Library Advisory Board is now open to anyone who lives in the ISD. We have the Parks Foundation that is opened up to anyone within the ISD. We have the EDC that is now open. And so what we've tried to do is make it possible for people, even though they may not be able to serve on the city council, they may not be able to vote in city elections, they can still participate through those other boards and commissions. And so I think that broadens the net a little bit. And then as far as working with the ISD, what I would like to see us do is to hold more joint meetings with the ISD board. We've only had one since I've been elected. And I would like to see those on maybe a semi-annual basis, to where we're working with them to find out, you know, what their plans are, what they're doing, what we're doing. We have a couple of agreements with them to where if the ISD wants to use city property, they can do it at free of charge. And then we've got a reciprocity where, same thing, if the city needs to use ISD property for an event or something, they let us do it free of charge. And so we're working with them on some of those things. I'm sure there's other things we could work on that I can't think of though right now.
Our second to last question is, are there any short or long-term plans for youth development? And if so, or if not, can you also give us your own opinion about youth development for the city of Hutto?
So I guess I'd like to maybe ask a clarification on, like, what do you mean by youth development? Like, kind of what would be your definition of that?
Well, this was submitted by the audience, and I'm going to broaden it. Youth
Okay.
development might be rec centers. They might be
Okay.
parks and rec. It might be having more activities or open space for youth to connect and commune within our city limits.
Got it. Okay. All right. That makes sense. And so the biggest thing that we have right now is the Y, where the Y uses our facility. So that facility that the Y uses, I don't know if many of you know this, but the city owns that property and owns that building. And then we allow the Y to manage it, and we kind of, they pay us basically the rent for that, and they manage it. And so we've got that for the youth, but really most of the youth programs that we have as a city are funded through the outside agencies that we use. So we have the Sandbox at Madeline's Place, we have the Hutto Resource Center, and we've got some of the other groups. I can't remember some of the other ones. There's some new ones that just came to us for agency funding this past year. I think one was called Life Point, which is a youth program. There's another youth sporting program. There's a youth program that does karate. And so what we're doing as a council, and what I'm in favor of, is giving funding to those agencies to let them focus on what they're pros at, right? You help people who know what they're doing with the funding so they can go and do it. Rather than taking it on as a city, I would prefer to give them the extra funding they need to be able to go and take care of it, because they know what they're doing and they can do it a lot better than I could. And so that's what we've done. I think we handed out just short of $200,000 this month to outside agencies to help them with all of their needs. And a lot of them were youth-based programs.
So to surmise, instead of taking $200,000 and improving parks or doing something in open space, the money is better spent by supporting organizations that are supporting you?
Yeah, that's kind of been our approach, because we have in our budget, we can spend up to 1% of our annual budget on what we call outside agency requests. So people who come to us. Now, not all of them are youth programs. Some of them are food programs, and so a lot of them are feeding, people who don't have money to buy meals, those kind of things. But we do have a lot of money in those bonds that I was talking about for parks. And so we're doing massive improvements to Fritz Park, which is the main park in the city of Hutto. We're adding a splash pad, we're adding volleyball courts, we're improving the volleyball courts, we're adding basketball courts, we're adding playgrounds. And then we also have huge plans to develop the second largest park within the city, and that is Lakeside Park, that's down by Lakeside Estates. But we've already got money set aside through the bond program to do those improvements.
Those are amazing projects. Where can we look those up if we wanted to see some of the agencies that have some of the youth programs that you mentioned?
So as far as the youth programs, that's a great question. I don't know.
Maybe you need to add that to your transparency checklist.
Yeah, we definitely need to get the word out there, because I'm just taking a look to see if we've published it anywhere on the Hutto website. Because there were about a dozen different agencies that we gave assistance to. And so we should definitely have that list out there so people know where to go. So that's a great point. All right, well, I'm happy to give a closing statement. I'm really grateful for the opportunity that I've had to talk to all of you. You've got some great questions. I think that we've got a great populace who is very informed and who is becoming more and more informed within the city of Hutto. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that I have been given to be able to serve at this time. I'm excited to serve the community. It's not an easy time to serve in the public eye in the political stage that we're in, right? And it starts at the top. And it's just not, it's not fun at times.
It's very muddy.
And there's just a lot of things going on. There's a lot of unfortunately information and then misinformation. And so what I encourage people to do is to come to me and ask questions. If there's anything that you're concerned about, if you read something on Facebook, if you read something in the news, come to a member of council and ask us what's really going on, because more often than not, I found they get it wrong. The news agencies don't get it all right. you know, it's just not accurate. So if you want to come to us to get the right information, you know, feel free to reach out and to ask us, you know, what's going on and what's happening, what, you know, what's really going on, and we'll tell you. And we can even put an agenda item on the city council to have a discussion right there, so that it's public, it's recorded, it's out there, so people can know what's going on. But I would really, really like to see more people being willing to get involved within the city. We have a real struggle of keeping our boards and commissions full. We've got open vacancies on most of our boards and commissions. And we look through the list of people who've applied, and it's just the same people. We've got some people serving on 2 or 3 boards and commissions because we just don't have anyone else to serve. And so I would love to see a wider participation and people willing to get involved in that way. So whatever you can do within your organization to encourage people to get involved, we would love to see it. I would love to see it. I think it'd be great.
You hear that, Black families of Hutto? There are opportunities for us to get involved in the City of Hutto boards. They need us. They need you specifically. And there are all sorts of boards. I'm apolitical, but just so you know, you may have a passion in working with the Parks and Rec, or you may have working with the youth. You may have with Hutto beautification. You may have planning and zoning. We may have some parts for working with our economic development. And those commitments are not as big as being on the city council, and they need you. So I'm just taking that soft plug there. And we want to thank you, Mr. Gordan, for coming to speak to us this evening. Mr. Gordan put his contact information right there, peter.gordon@huttotexas.gov, as well as his phone to reach out for him. And the other local election is House 52, Mr. Terrence Belong. But in our Facebook group, we have been disseminating that information, and so stay up to date for current events there. And I guess with that, Vanessa, would you like to sign us off?
No, I would just like to thank everyone for attending today. Thank you to those who submitted questions prior to the start of the event or throughout the event. And we really want to echo what Mr. Gordan stated about being engaged and involved in activities going on here in Hutto. So if you need more information about board or committee or councils that are forming, that information is available off of the City of Hutto website, but also feel free to engage with our social action and voter mobilization team, and we can share information and resources or contacts as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Hey, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's wonderful.
Yes. Thank you.
Have a good night, y'all. You can end the recording.